Hi, I am Melesias. Today, we are not stepping into a quiet sanctuary, as we did with Spinoza. We are stepping into a storm. A storm of laughter, of anger, of dazzling wit and merciless satire. We are going to meet a man who was not afraid to mock kings, priests, and philosophers alike. A man who spent his life fighting with a pen that was sharper than any sword. We are going to meet François-Marie Hérouet. The world knows him as Voltaire. Imagine the France of the 18th century. It is a world of immense privilege and immense suffering. The aristocracy lives in gilded palaces, while the poor starve in the streets. The church holds absolute power, and any voice that dares to question its authority is swiftly silenced. Into this world, Voltaire was born, in 1694, with a mind too quick and a tongue too sharp for his own good. He was imprisoned in the Bastille not once, but twice, for his satirical writings. He was exiled from Paris, beaten by the servants of a nobleman he had offended, and forced to flee to England. And it was in England, this land of relative freedom and scientific progress, that his philosophy began to take shape. There, he discovered Isaac Newton, whose physics revealed a universe governed by rational laws, not by the whims of a vengeful God. There, he met John Locke, who argued that all knowledge comes from experience, not from innate ideas or divine revelation. And there, he encountered a society that, however imperfect, seemed far more tolerant and reasonable than the absolutist France he had left behind. He returned to the continent a changed man, armed with a new set of ideas and a burning desire to fight against what he called Ellen fame, the infamous thing. By this, he meant all forms of religious intolerance, superstition, and the abuse of power by the clergy. His weapon was not violence, but reason, wit, and a devastating sense of irony. And then, on November 1, 1755, the earth shook. A massive earthquake, followed by a tsunami and a fire, destroyed the city of Lisbon in Portugal. Tens of thousands of people were killed. It was one of the deadliest natural disasters in European history, and it shattered the intellectual world. How could a good God allow such a thing to happen? The philosophers of the time, deeply influenced by Leibniz, had an answer. They said that this was the best of all possible worlds, and that every apparent evil was part of a greater, divine plan. Voltaire was horrified. He saw the suffering in Lisbon with his own eyes, and he could not accept that this was part of any benevolent plan. He wrote a poem, a cry of anguish against the heavens, and then, 4 years later, he wrote a novel. That novel was Candide, or Optimism. It was published in 1759, and it became an instant sensation, although it was immediately banned and burned by the authorities. It is the story of a young, innocent man who has been taught by his tutor, the philosopher Pangloss, that everything happens for the best. He then proceeds to witness, in quick succession, war, rape, earthquake, shipwreck, betrayal, and every conceivable form of human cruelty. The gap between Pangloss's theory and Candide's reality is so wide, so absurd, that you cannot help but laugh. But it is a bitter laughter. A laughter that hurts. In this series, we will follow Candide on his dizzying journey across the globe. We will witness the horrors he endures, and we will ask the same question that Voltaire asked, the question that still haunts us today. Is this world the best we could hope for? Or is the philosophy of optimism simply a cruel joke? And if so, what are we to do? How are we to live in a world that is so clearly imperfect? So find a quiet place, prepare for a journey that is as absurd as it is profound, and let us open the pages of Candide. Once upon a time, in a grand and illustrious castle in the German region of Westphalia, there lived a young man named Candide. His name means white, pure, ingenuous, and he was all of these things. He had a gentle heart and a simple mind. He was the illegitimate nephew of the Baron Thunder Tentronck, a man whose immense pride was matched only by the grandiosity of his name. The castle was, in the eyes of its inhabitants, the very center of the universe, a microcosm of perfection. And in this castle, there was a philosopher. His name was Pangloss, and he was the oracle of the household. Pangloss taught a system of thought known as metaphysico-theologo-cosmologology, a name as absurd and pompous as the philosophy itself. His central doctrine, which he repeated with the conviction of a man who has never been contradicted, was this: everything is for the best in this best of all possible worlds. This was not presented as a hypothesis, a hope, or a matter of faith. It was presented as a logical proof. Pangloss argued that since God is perfect, the world he created must also be perfect. Noses were made to wear spectacles, and so we have spectacles. Legs were made for breeches, and so we wear breeches. Stones were made to build castles, and so the Baron has a very fine castle. Every cause has an effect, every effect has a cause, and the whole magnificent chain leads, inevitably and beautifully, to the conclusion that all is well. Candide listened, wide-eyed and trusting, believing every word. He looked at the beautiful Lady Cunegond, the Baron's daughter, and thought to himself that indeed, this must be the best of all possible worlds. But the world, as Voltaire is about to show us, has a way of shattering such neat little systems. One day, behind a screen, Candide and Cunegond exchange a kiss. It is an innocent gesture, but the Baron sees it. And for this small act of tenderness, Candide is kicked out of the castle with violent, unceremonious shoves. He is driven from paradise. He stumbles, bewildered and starving, into the neighboring town, where he is immediately conscripted by 2 soldiers of the King of the Bulgars. They force him to drink to the king's health, put him in irons, and drag him into the army. The optimist's world is now one of violence and absurdity. Candide is drilled, beaten, and transformed into a soldier. One spring day, he decides to take a pleasant walk, as he believes in the natural freedom of all men. He is caught, and he is given a choice: he can be flogged 36 times by the entire regiment, or he can have 12 lead bullets shot into his brain. Heroically, he chooses the flogging, but after a few thousand lashes, he begs for the mercy of the bullet. He is pardoned and sent to the hospital, his body a tattered canvas of pain. And as he heals, the King of the Bulgars goes to war with the King of the Avars. What follows is a depiction of war that is as chilling today as it was in 1759. Candide, caught in the middle, watches as 2 armies, splendidly uniformed and marching to glorious music, proceed to slaughter each other. Voltaire describes the scene with a savage irony that cuts to the bone. Nothing could have been more beautiful, brilliant, smart, or orderly than the 2 armies, he writes. The trumpets, fifes, oboes, drums, and cannon produced a harmony such as is never heard in hell. And then, after this beautiful harmony, the field is left littered with the dead and the dying, old men, women, and children, all butchered, for the best in the best of all possible worlds. Candide, his heart sick with horror, deserts the army. He flees to Holland, a country he has heard is rich and Christian, and therefore, surely, its people will treat him with kindness. He is met by an orator preaching charity, who asks him if he believes the Pope is the Antichrist. When Candide answers honestly that he knows nothing of the matter, he is refused bread and spat upon. It takes an Anabaptist named Jacques, a man who has not been baptized and who represents simple, practical goodness, to take him in, feed him, and give him work. For a moment, it seems, humanity has a chance. And then, Candide meets a beggar. A wretched creature covered in pustules, his eyes dead, his nose half-eaten away, his mouth twisted, his teeth black, coughing violently and spitting out a tooth with every spasm. This horrifying apparition is his old tutor, Pangloss. The philosopher, still clinging to his system, explains what happened. Candide, he says, was raped and disemboweled by Bulgar soldiers. The Baron, her father, was killed trying to defend her. The Baroness was hacked to pieces. And Pangloss himself contracted a vile disease, which he traces back, with ludicrous precision, through a chain of transmission all the way to Christopher Columbus. It was a thing indispensable in the best of worlds, he says, for if Columbus had not caught this disease in an island in America, which poisons the source of generations, we would not have chocolate. Think about this for a moment. He has just described the brutal murder of an entire family. He is rotting from the inside out. And his only concern is to weave this horror into his grand philosophical system. This is not just a caricature of a stubborn thinker. This is Voltaire holding up a mirror to all of us, asking, how much suffering are you willing to explain away before you admit that your theory is broken? The good Jacques, moved by pity, takes Pangloss in, pays for his cure, and loses only one eye and one ear in the process. Life, it seems, is settling into a new rhythm. Jacques then takes both Candide and Pangloss on a business trip to Lisbon. And as they approach the coast, a violent storm hits. The ship is torn apart. Jacques, reaching out to save a drowning sailor, is thrown into the sea. And the sailor, whom he saved, lets him drown without lifting a finger. Candide wants to jump in, but Pangloss holds him back, proving logically that the Bay of Lisbon had been formed expressly for this Anabaptist to drown in. As he finishes his proof, the ship breaks apart and Jacques dies. As Candide and Pangloss scramble onto the wreckage, barely alive, the earth beneath them begins to tremble. The Great Lisbon earthquake is about to strike. Candide, the innocent, the trusting, the disciple of optimism, has been whipped, conscripted, shot at, and shipwrecked. He has witnessed the kindness of a good man and seen that man drown for his trouble. His beloved is dead. His mentor is a rotting corpse clinging to a hollow philosophy. And now, the very ground beneath his feet is about to crack open. How much longer can a man believe that this is the best of all possible worlds? At what point does faith in a grand design become a mockery of human suffering? Candide is still breathing, still hoping, still clinging to the lessons of his childhood. But the universe, as we will see, is not yet finished with him. The earthquake is just the beginning. The ground had barely stopped shaking. Candide and Pangloss, bruised and bleeding, pulled themselves from the wreckage of the shattered port. Lisbon, one of the most beautiful and wealthy cities in Europe, was now a smoldering graveyard. Tens of thousands lay dead beneath the rubble. The air was thick with dust, smoke, and the cries of the dying. It was November 1st, 1755, All Saints' Day. The churches were full when the earth split open and swallowed the faithful. And here, in the face of this unimaginable catastrophe, the philosophy of optimism reveals its true, monstrous face. The good people of Portugal, desperate to understand why God had punished them so terribly, turned to the Inquisition. A scapegoat is needed. A sacrifice to appease the divine wrath. The wise men of the University of Coimbra decide that a splendid auto de fe, a public burning of heretics, is the only logical solution. It was decided by the University of Coimbra, Voltaire writes with an irony so sharp it can draw blood, that the sight of a few people ceremonially burned alive over a slow fire was an infallible secret for preventing the earth from quaking. Pangloss, ever the philosopher, is arrested for speaking his mind. Candide, ever the innocent, is arrested for listening with an air of approval. They are led in a procession, wearing paper mitres and painted robes. Pangloss is hanged. Candide is flogged to the rhythm of a solemn chant. And as the last lash falls, the earth shakes again. It is a second, smaller tremor, as if the universe itself is laughing at their absurd rituals. Candide, his back a sheet of fire, stumbles away, utterly alone, his mentor dead, his philosophy in ashes. He asks himself, in the quiet of his soul, a question that must have haunted Voltaire himself. If this is the best of all possible worlds, what must the others be like? He is no longer an innocent boy. He is a man who has seen the worst that nature and human cruelty can offer. And yet, just when the darkness seems absolute, a hand reaches out to him in the crowd. An old woman, her face a map of ancient sorrows, leads him to a hovel on the outskirts of the city. There, in a room dimly lit by a single candle, he is reunited with a ghost. Candide. She is alive. The story she tells him is a brutal summary of Voltaire's view of women's fate in a world of men. She was raped, stabbed, and left for dead among her butchered family. She was then sold, traded, and shared as a sexual slave between a Jewish merchant, Don Issachar, and the Grand Inquisitor of Portugal himself. The two men have a timeshare agreement over her body, one gets her on weekdays, the other on the Sabbath. She is alive, but her life is a daily horror. And then, the door bursts open. It is Don Issachar, her master for the day. Candide, in a flash of unthinking violence, kills him with a sword. Moments later, the Grand Inquisitor arrives. Candide kills him too. In the space of a few minutes, the gentle Candide has become a double murderer. He has the blood of a moneylender and a prince of the church on his hands. The old woman, ever practical, tells them to take the horses and flee. They ride away into the night, pursued by the hounds of the Inquisition, their love affair baptized in blood. They ride south, toward Cadiz. There, they find a ship preparing to sail for the New World. Candide, who still has a shred of his old innocence, gives a magnificent display of his military skills and is instantly made a captain. He is sailing to Paraguay, to fight for the Jesuits against the Spanish and Portuguese. The dream of a new life in a new world fills his heart with a fragile hope. He, Candide, and the old woman board the ship, and as they sail away, Candide turns to his companions and begins, once again, to speak of how this must all be for the best in the best of all possible worlds. The old woman, who has lived a life of unimaginable suffering, looks at him with a mixture of pity and disbelief. "I have lived 80 years, she says, and I have seen a million men who would make you shudder. But I have never met one who did not believe his own misery to be the greatest in the world. They are sailing into the unknown. A world of Jesuit missions, of slavery, of Eldorado, and of 1,000 new forms of suffering and wonder." Candide clings to his hope. The old woman clings to her cynicism. And Candide, the prize they are all fighting for, is beginning to age, to tire, to lose the bloom that started all this madness. The journey is far from over. The world, Voltaire seems to whisper, is vast and strange and will not fit into any neat philosophical box. The only thing we can do is keep going, keep asking, and keep refusing to accept easy answers for unbearable truths. The ship cut through the vast, empty Atlantic, carrying Candide, and the old woman away from the blood-soaked cobblestones of Europe. Candide, his back still scarred from the flogging in Lisbon, spent his days on deck, talking. He talked of the love he had lost and miraculously found again. He talked of the villains he had been forced to kill. And he talked, endlessly, of how all of this must be part of a grand, benevolent plan, just as Pangloss had taught him. Candide listened, but her beauty, which had once seemed so celestial, was beginning to show the first faint lines of weariness and sorrow. The old woman, who had seen everything, mostly just shook her head and muttered to herself. One evening, as the sun bled into the sea, Candide turned to the old woman and asked her, with genuine curiosity, to tell him the story of her life. He expected a simple tale, perhaps a sad romance. What he got was a confession of such unrelenting horror that it made his own sufferings look like a pleasant country stroll. She was the daughter of a pope and a princess. She had been raised in a palace of unimaginable luxury. And then, in a single, shattering cascade of events, she had lost everything. She was captured by pirates, raped, sold into slavery, and forced to watch her mother be torn apart by wild beasts. She had survived plagues, sieges, and the amputation of one of her buttocks to feed starving soldiers. She had been a queen, a slave, a concubine, and a beggar. And now, here she was, an old woman with a wrinkled face and a single tooth left in her head, serving as a maid to a young, foolish girl and her equally foolish lover. "I have wanted to kill myself 100 times," she told Candide, "but I still loved life. It is a ridiculous weakness, perhaps. For what could be more stupid than to be unwilling to die, when one is so miserable?" Her story was a living, breathing refutation of Pangloss. It was not a philosophical argument, it was a body, scarred and broken, testifying to the simple, brutal fact that the world is not arranged for our happiness. And yet, the old woman was still alive. She had not killed herself. She had not fallen into despair. She had simply endured. It was not optimism. It was not philosophy. It was a raw, animal refusal to let the world win. When the ship finally reached the shores of South America, Candide's hopes of a new beginning were short-lived. They landed in Buenos Aires, a city of swaggering colonial power, where the governor, Don Fernando, immediately set his eyes on Candide. He decided to take her for himself. Candide, for the first time, understood that his love was a magnet for disaster. The Inquisition was already on his trail for the murders in Lisbon. He had to flee. His escape led him into the interior of the continent, where the grass grew taller than a man and the air hummed with a million unseen insects. He was accompanied now by a new companion, his valet Cacambo, a man of mixed race, sharp intelligence, and a loyalty that Candide had done nothing to deserve. Together, they stumbled into the territory of the Jesuit missions, a theocratic state where priests commanded armies of native people. And there, in a stunning twist of fate, Candide came face to face with the commanding officer of the mission. It was the brother of Candide, the young baron, whom Candide had believed to be dead, slaughtered in the castle in Westphalia. The reunion was joyous, then violent. Candide, overjoyed, announced his intention to marry his sister. The baron, whose pride had not been diminished one bit by his own survival, was outraged at the thought of his noble sister marrying a bastard with no pedigree. He struck Candide with the flat of his sword. Candide, in a moment of pure reflex, ran him through with his own. In the space of a few heartbeats, Candide had added the murder of his beloved's brother to his growing list of crimes. He and Cacambo fled again, plunging deeper into the uncharted wilderness. They had no plan, no map, no hope. They drifted down a river, past flowers that smelled like honey and cliffs that echoed with the screams of monkeys. And then, after days of floating, their canoe was swallowed by a roaring whirlpool. They clung to the wreckage, were dashed against rocks, and washed ashore on a land so silent, so peaceful, so impossibly beautiful, that they knew they were somewhere that did not belong to the world of men. It was Eldorado. A land of perfect equality, where gold was as common as dust and precious gems were pebbles children played with in the street. There was no church, no Inquisition, no need for law. The people were gentle, rational, and utterly uninterested in the riches that drove the rest of humanity to madness. When Candide and Cacambo were received by the king, they were treated not as strangers, but as equals. They dined in a palace of unimaginable splendor, where the conversation was about science and philosophy, not about power or conquest. There was no suffering here. No war. No tyranny. It was, in every way, the best of all possible worlds. And after a month of this perfect peace, Candide made a decision that reveals the deepest, most uncomfortable truth of Voltaire's story. He decided to leave. He had found paradise. And he walked away. Why? Because his heart was still tethered to the world he had left. Because he loved Candide, and she was not there. Because he wanted to be rich, powerful, and respected in the real world, not just in a forgotten utopia. The king of Eldorado, with a sad smile, granted his wish. He gave them a flock of red sheep laden with gold and jewels, and a machine to carry them over the mountains. Candide and Cacambo left paradise, convinced that with all this wealth, they could now buy their happiness in the world below. They were, of course, terribly, tragically wrong. One by one, the sheep died, fell into ravines, or were stolen. By the time they reached the coast of Suriname, their fortune was already a fraction of what they had started with. And there, standing on the edge of a Dutch colony, they encountered the final, irrefutable proof that optimism was a lie. A black man, lying on the ground. He was missing his left leg and his right hand. He was a slave. Candide, his voice trembling, asked him who had done this to him. The man looked up at him with tired eyes and said, simply, "It is the custom. When we work in the sugar mills and our finger gets caught in the machinery, they cut off the hand. When we try to run away, they cut off the leg. I have been through both. It is at this price that you eat sugar in Europe." Candide wept. For the first time in his life, he did not try to explain the suffering away. He did not invoke the best of all possible worlds. He simply wept, and said to himself, "I am giving up optimism." The word, at last, had crumbled. The system lay in ruins. All that was left was the raw, unbearable fact of human cruelty, and the vast, echoing silence of a universe that did not care. Candide stood on the dock in Suriname, the tears still wet on his face. The image of the mutilated slave was burned into his mind. He had seen war, earthquake, and shipwreck. He had been flogged and left for dead. But this calm, systematic, economically rationalized cruelty, was what finally broke him. He turned to his valet, Cacambo, and spoke the words that marked the end of his philosophical childhood. Pangloss, he said, was a liar. This is not the best of all possible worlds. It is a world of horror. And yet, the business of living had to go on. Candide still loved Candide, still needed to reach her in Buenos Aires. He sent Cacambo ahead with a fortune to buy her freedom, agreeing to meet him in Venice. All that was left for Candide was to find a companion for the long voyage to Europe. He announced that he would pay passage and a large sum of money to the most unfortunate man in the province. Dozens of applicants appeared, each with a tale more wretched than the last. Candide listened to them all, and then he chose a man named Martin. Martin was not the most unfortunate in any obvious way. He had not been flogged or mutilated. But he had something worse, a quiet, settled, philosophical despair. He was a Manichaean. He believed that the universe was not governed by a good God, but was a battleground between equal forces of good and evil, and that evil was winning. His wife had robbed him, his son had abandoned him, and a rival had destroyed his career. He had not died, but he had stopped hoping. He was, in essence, the anti-Pangloss. And so, the optimist who had lost his faith and the pessimist who had found his sail together for Europe. They were the perfect pair. Candide still clung, by habit, to the hope that things might improve. Martin was serenely certain that they would not. As their ship glided over the dark Atlantic, they passed a Dutch warship locked in combat with a Spanish vessel. The cannon fire echoed across the water like thunder. Candide watched the smoke and fire and said, "What a terrible thing is war." Martin replied, "Which is worse, the evil we do, or the evil that is done to us?" Candide had no answer. They arrived in France, and Candide, still carrying the remnants of his Eldorado fortune, was immediately swarmed by parasites. Doctors, merchants, gamblers, and fashionable women circled him like sharks. He fell ill, was bled by physicians, and was robbed blind by a clever abbé. In Paris, he witnessed a society that was elegant on the surface and utterly corrupt beneath, a world where wit was valued more than truth, and cruelty was just another form of entertainment. Martin, watching the same scenes, simply smiled his thin, sad smile. "I told you," he seemed to say without speaking. "This is the way of the world." They fled to England, where they arrived just in time to witness the public execution of an admiral. Why was the admiral being shot? Candide asked. Because, an Englishman explained, he did not get enough of his own men killed. It is necessary, from time to time, to shoot an admiral, to encourage the others. Candide was horrified. He refused to set foot on English soil. He and Martin sailed directly for Venice, where Candide hoped, against all evidence, to find his beloved Cundegund and his faithful Cacambo. In Venice, they searched for months. Candide dined with nobles who were bored to death, visited courtesans who sold their youth for gold, and met a man so happy he was miserable, and another so miserable he was happy. Everywhere he looked, he found contradiction and confusion. There was no sign of Cacambo. No sign of Cundegund. His fortune was running low. His hope was running lower. And then, one evening, in a dimly lit inn, he met a face he recognized. It was Paquette, the chambermaid from the castle in Westphalia, the very woman from whom Pangloss had contracted his vile disease. She was now a prostitute in Venice, her beauty faded, her eyes empty. And on her arm was a monk, a man of God, who had abandoned his vows to live in sin with her. Candide, ever curious, asked them their stories. Paquette, like the old woman, had a tale of unending woe. The monk, whose name was Brother Giroflee, explained that he hated the monastery. He hated the chanting, the fasting, the endless hypocrisy of his fellow monks. He had fled, and now lived in a state of perpetual guilt and poverty. So you see, Martin said to Candide, even those who seem to have chosen their own misery are miserable. There is no escape. And then, at last, Cacambo appeared. But he was not the proud, sharp-witted valet Candide remembered. He was a slave. The fortune he had carried had been stolen, and he had been sold into servitude. Candide, with what little money he had left, bought his freedom. And Cacambo told him the news he had been both dreading and longing for. Cundegund was alive. She was in Constantinople. But she was no longer the beautiful, radiant girl Candide had kissed behind the screen in Westphalia. She was old, and ugly, and a slave, washing dishes for a deposed prince. Candide did not hesitate. He chartered a ship for Constantinople. He would find her. He would keep his promise. He would marry her, not out of passion, but out of duty. And perhaps, he thought, this was the final test. Perhaps, after all this suffering, after all this wandering, he would find a small, quiet corner of the world where he could finally be at peace. But the world, as Voltaire was about to show him, still had one last lesson to teach. A lesson about work, about simplicity, and about the one thing that might, just might, make life bearable. The ship carrying Candide, Martin, and Cacambo sailed through the warm waters of the Mediterranean, toward the ancient city of Constantinople. Candide sat on the deck, his eyes fixed on the horizon, his heart a strange mixture of duty and dread. He was going to find Cundegund. He was going to keep his word. But the image of the radiant girl he had kissed behind the screen in Westphalia had been replaced, in his mind, by the grim reality Cacambo had described. A woman, old, ugly, and broken, washing dishes for a foreign prince. Love, it seemed, was not a feeling. It was a promise. And he would honor it. As they sailed, they passed 2 galleys filled with slaves, rowing under the lash of the Turkish sun. Candide, ever curious, asked the captain who these unfortunate men were. Among them, the captain said, were 2 Franks, condemned to the oars for their crimes. Candide, moved by a sudden impulse, used the last of his dwindling fortune to buy their freedom. When the chains were struck off and the 2 men were brought before him, he felt the world tilt on its axis. One of them was Pangloss. The other was the young baron, the brother of Cundegund, whom Candide had run through with a sword in the jungles of Paraguay. Pangloss, it turned out, had been badly hanged, but not fatally. The rope had been wet, the knot had slipped, and a surgeon, thinking him a worthless corpse, had bought his body for dissection. He had awakened on the slab, screaming, and had been stitched back together. His nose was still missing, eaten by the disease that had ravaged him in Holland. His voice was a croak. But his philosophy was perfectly intact. I still hold my original opinions, he declared, for what kind of philosopher would I be, if I changed my mind? The baron, meanwhile, had survived Candide's blade. His wound had been dressed, he had recovered, and he had been captured by pirates and sold into slavery. He was as proud as ever, as arrogant as ever, and as utterly convinced of his own noble superiority as ever. Suffering had taught him nothing. It had merely hardened his sense of entitlement. This was Voltaire's final, wicked joke at the expense of humanity. Here were 2 men who had endured unimaginable horrors. One clung to a philosophy that the horrors themselves had disproven. The other clung to a social status that the horrors had rendered meaningless. Neither had learned a single thing. Suffering, Voltaire seems to whisper, does not automatically make you wise. It can just as easily make you blind. The ship docked in Constantinople. Candide, wasting no time, sought out the farm where Cundegund was held. He found her in a small, dusty courtyard, bent over a basin of greasy water, her hands red and raw. He looked at her. The years of suffering, the loss, the fear, the endless flight across continents, all of it had carved deep lines into her face. Her hair was gray. Her teeth were few. She was not the beautiful girl he had dreamed of for so long. She was a tired, worn, elderly woman. And Candide, the hero, the lover, the man who had crossed oceans and killed men for this woman, felt a great, cold wave of disappointment wash over him. He did not want to marry her. She had become ugly, and he found himself repulsed. But his honor, his stubborn, foolish, magnificent honor, would not let him break his word. He had promised. The world had taken everything from her, her youth, her beauty, her family, her home. It would not take her promised husband. He married her anyway. He married her, and he invited Pangloss, Martin, Cacambo, and the old woman to live with them. He bought a small, poor farm on the outskirts of the city. The baron, of course, refused to acknowledge the marriage. His pride was a rock that even the ocean of suffering could not erode. Candide, in a final, weary act of violence, had him arrested and deported. And so, the little community settled into their new life. But it was not a happy life. Candide grew more bitter and shrewish with each passing day. Pangloss talked endlessly, filling the air with hollow words. Martin accepted their misery with a quiet, philosophical shrug. They were, as Voltaire puts it, bored to death. They had survived everything, and now they had nothing to do but sit around and think about how miserable they were. One day, consumed by a restlessness he could not name, Candide went for a walk. He came across a small, neat farm, and on the porch sat an old man, serene and smiling. He was a Turk, a simple farmer, who lived with his children. Candide asked him if he had a large estate. The old man replied that he had only 20 acres, which he cultivated himself with his family. The work, he said, keeps us from 3 great evils: boredom, vice, and need. Candide returned to his own farm, a new thought turning in his mind. He looked at Pangloss, who was still theorizing. He looked at Martin, who was still despairing. He looked at the small patch of uncultivated land behind their house. And he said to his companions, "We must cultivate our garden." And so they did. Candide, Pangloss, Martin, and the others, they stopped talking and started working. They planted vegetables. They tended fruit trees. They dug in the earth with their hands, and the earth gave them food. Pangloss, every now and then, would pause, wipe his brow, and say, "This is all part of a grand chain of being, for when man was placed in the Garden of Eden, he was placed there to work, which proves that man was not born for rest." Candide would listen, and then reply, "That is well said, but we must cultivate our garden. This is not a call to withdraw from the world, to ignore its injustices, to retreat into a selfish bubble. It is a call to focus on what we can control. The world is vast, and chaotic, and full of suffering that no philosophy can ever fully explain away. But the small patch of earth beneath our feet, that we can tend, that we can improve, that we can make beautiful. And in the act of caring for something, in the quiet rhythm of useful labor, we find not a solution to the problem of evil, but an antidote to the despair it breeds." Voltaire does not end his great satire with a triumphant answer. He ends it with a quiet, humble, and deeply human suggestion. Stop asking whether this is the best of all possible worlds. It isn't. But it is our world. And the only way to make it bearable is to work, together, to make it better, one small patch of earth at a time. I am Melesias. This has been the story of Candide, or Optimism, by Voltaire. Thank you for listening. If this journey through absurdity and suffering has moved you, I invite you to carry its final lesson with you into your own life. The world is not perfect. It may never be. But there is work to be done, and it is good to do it. So go. Cultivate your garden.